I feed off of, my customer or my friend or client's emotion. When you're able to provide that experience and create those memories, they're just so deep and lasting. That's irreplaceable and priceless. It blows my mind the intricate details that people remember from that one memory and running with you. But it shows that you impacted somebody. That's why you do it. That's what makes it all worth it, and kind of stokes the coals again to keep going and keep pushing on, on that. Like, how can you replicate, the sound and I always say there's a feeling, right? When you're in a blind and there's just thousands of geese setting up and spinning you to come in and finish, or you land them and let them spin again and there's thousands of geese sitting in the decoys at 10 yards. How do you get a dog steady for that? I get a lot of times guys that'll come in and say, oh, my dog's the, field trial champion or hunt test champion of this, or has got all these ribbons and yada, yada, yada. You know what? I'm sure they are great dogs at what they're trained to do. However, if they don't ever hunt and have real life application, it's not the dog's fault when they crack under pressure like that until you get a dog that's been in the field 30, 60, 100 days a year or more. At that point, you get a couple of years under a dog's belt, they'll just about run you.
Welcome back to another episode of GDIY. I'm joined this time by Connor Gough of Great Lakes Guided Outdoors. Connor, how you doing this evening?
Hey man, we're doing very well. It's been a beautiful couple days here in Michigan. I just got home from Oklahoma, so I've been able to soak up some time with the family and was able to pencil some time aside to do a quick podcast here. So I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah, what were you doing down in Oklahoma? Still knocking down what birds you could find?
Yeah, so we actually had a really good season down there. Obviously, the weather was less than perfect for the first few weeks. It was real warm. Really, a couple first months, it was warmer than usual. Not only in Oklahoma, but the problem was just so much further north. It was very warm, really all the way up past the Canada border. So typically you rely on some of that cold weather to push the birds down to us, but we were fortunate to be able to work with what we had and made the most of it. Had a lot of happy hunters and good memories made, so can't complain there.
Yeah, man. It's interesting that, this year, especially, I'm down here in Tennessee, so any of the migrating birds, ducks, woodcocks, even snipe, like, it's been a strange year just with, the weather pattern, and I don't know if it's El Nino or what have you, but I've actually heard from numerous people up in your area, kind of the Northwoods. They say that it was just actually a really good year for duck hunting because it's kind of like some of the birds that kind of show up and then split and head south. They just kind of hung around a lot longer. So I know a number of people that had a pretty successful season waterfowl hunting if they're up north high enough. Would you say that, like, did you notice anything on your end in regards to that kind of similar situation?
Yeah, just first and foremost, it's February, right? So typically at this point, we've got 30 to 36 inches of ice on all our lakes, and really the only thing to do around here is snowmobile or ice fish. And right now, it's like, is the ice even safe to go out on? Which, you don't need a whole lot of ice to fish, but, you start sprinkling in a few lengths of days that are in the 50s or rain or whatever, and it eats that safe ice up in a hurry. We aren't getting the winters that we used to. So I think you're spot on there where a lot of these guys, that did hunt the full season here were able to really reap the reward of of a warmer year to where the birds definitely hung out. And, looking at one area that's kind of small scale, but looking over the course of the entire flyway, like you said, Tennessee and Kentucky, and even looking into, Illinois and Ohio and Indiana, they used to see a lot more of a migration, especially the Canada goose and mallards and such, that over the course of the last 5, 10, 15 years, it's just started to dwindle as things have been trending a little bit warmer.
Yeah.
So I think, it's definitely on that path for sure.
It's really interesting as years ago, it's been quite a while. I was a much more dedicated duck hunter than what I am now. I'm pretty much an opportunistic duck hunter when it comes to getting out in the water and busting ice or setting decoys. I have my own little seasonal flooded timber on my own property that's good for a couple wood duck shoots usually. This year, man, I didn't see any birds. Granted, we didn't have the water to begin with, so it's warm and there's no
Sure.
water. But it wasn't until literally like the last day of season did I see any ducks on my property, and it was just a couple wood ducks. And so, it's like I'm not gonna go shoot those on the last day of season. It's kind of like
Yeah.
it was just kind of a dry season. But I mean, it's interesting, and especially again, I know the El Nino is impacting the country and just overall temperatures everywhere, and that's something that I've kind of toyed around with, trying to find somebody that can speak to this a little bit better and the impact that it has on migrating birds. But yeah, man, usually I look forward to getting at least a variety, get some waterfowl in the freezer a little bit anyway. But this year it wasn't in the cards for me.
Sure. Yeah, that part of the world, I mean, for what I know, I mean, I'm only 26. I mean, I wasn't, in it, and we'll call it the heyday, back in the early 90s and prior, when guys were really hitting it hard down in your corner of the world and in Illinois. So I don't have a whole lot to compare it to. We've always had Canada geese here where I grew up,
Mm.
but I definitely stories of, clients and friends. It seems like that used to really be the place to be. Tennessee and Southern Illinois, has a very, very deep rooted history in waterfowl hunting, and it's just not necessarily the case.
Yeah, yeah, it seems to
So
be a dwindling size culture. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons or theories or guesses as to why it's dwindling. It's not just weather related. It's I don't know. We can go down that rabbit hole a little bit later if we want to. But first,
sure.
I want you to kind of take a second, introduce yourself to everybody, kind of tell everybody what it is that you do. A 26-year-old that's operating his own guiding service up north. It's a pretty interesting story, and I want to kind of get some background on it.
Yeah, so I started Great Lakes Guided Outdoors in 2020 after I'd already done, a handful of years of either guiding or working, with other outfits, not only in Michigan but across the country. And that exposure to those other operations kind of got me thinking like, hey, I've got a good thing going at home and could turn into something. So we kicked things off then, and it's just been a snowball effect since then of waterfowl hunting and then also turkey hunting in the springtime. And then obviously that's only a few months out of the year between those two things. So try and supplement the rest of the year with charter fishing, other places. We do a little bit here in Michigan, and then also the rest of the season in Florida, offshore and inshore fishing. And then, as we just mentioned and discussed, being in Oklahoma, I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time through the winters in the Central Flyway, probably over the course of the last 6 to 8 years. And, that's a really special part of the world for a waterfowl migration. Obviously weather dependent, but man, you see some really cool things there. So
Mm.
spent about 3 months there in Oklahoma with Blue Stem the last couple of years. And the waterfowl hunting is a very, very, very cool thing in the Central Flyway. If you haven't done it or seen it, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I haven't got to experience that myself yet. I'm curious. Sometimes when people start mixing business with pleasure, obviously you got into this probably just because you had a love and a passion for the outdoors. It's kind of hit or miss for some guys. It's like you're taking something that you love doing yourself, maybe just you and your dogs or you and your buddies,
Sure,
what have
sure.
you, and you hang your shingle out and it becomes a business, and then work is work regardless if you have a passion for it or not at the end of the day. So what was it like when you finally decided to hang that shingle out and start taking clients out and mixing business with pleasure?
It's a really good question, and I think it's a pretty deep one for sure. There's a lot of different ways you can look at that, different angles, different ways to cut it. The nitty gritty though is obviously life is expensive, and operating an outfitting company of any scale is expensive, especially in today's society. You hate to say, look at the cost of things, and the trending curve of as the temperature's gone up. As we're talking about waterfowl, so has the price of everything else. So you start talking about fuel and insurance and equipment, and trying to find good help and what it costs to have good help versus you pay peanuts and get monkeys. It all adds up. So it is difficult to separate, right, like the actual financial side of things, and not being too stressed to take the fun out of it, like you said, where it's something that you grew up loving. you don't want to lose that passion for it. And when people lose the passion for it, it shows, right? Like in your attitude and in your performance and in your customer service. And that's just a recipe for disaster. So, I've been very, very fortunate to be able to separate, the business side from the personal interaction. Granted, you have to have both sides running smoothly, but, I definitely haven't been burnt out on it, with it being, my livelihood. And I think there's a lot of people that do ask that frequently. They're like, don't you get burnt out? Because at this point, I'm guiding or chartering probably 320 to 330 or more days a year,
Mm.
which you don't really, I don't even really realize it, until I put it in perspective. And I'm like, man, I really didn't have that many days off last year. But I feed off of, my customer or my friend or client's emotions, in the field more than anything else. And, when you're able to provide that experience and create those memories that they're just so deep and lasting, that's irreplaceable and priceless.
Yeah.
And I get guys that will contact me and they're like, hey, you remember that day that, such and such happened? And they'll just go into the craziest detail about everything. And I always remember the hunt and the memory with them, but it blows my mind just the intricate details that people remember from that one memory and running with you 1 year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago or more, but it shows that you impacted somebody with the opportunity that you created, for and with them. So it's like, that's why you do it. And so when you get somebody that's able to reflect on a moment like that or a memory like that, that's what makes it all worth it, and kind of stokes the coals again to keep going and keep pushing on, on that 300th day of the year, when something broke, and you still have to slap it together and make something, like you just said, you make chicken salad out of chicken shit.
Right.
You said that just a minute ago before we started. And that's exactly how it is, though. You have to focus on still creating that great experience for everybody. So the people that are in guiding and outfitting strictly for the hunting, and for the killing, which granted you do need to put good results out for your clients, consistently. But the people that in the guiding world are in it for that, they're the ones that get burnt out. They're the ones that get the bad attitude, and they forget to focus on that customer side of things. And, ultimately it's not a good road for them to be on.
Yeah. We talk about kind of the different stages of hunters, right? You first come into hunting and it's like, you want numbers, right? You want to
Sure.
stack the tailgate, you want the pictures, and then maybe you're going for quality. If you're a deer hunter, you want a bigger
Mm-hmm.
deer. If you want a certain type of duck or upland bird or whatever, you start trophy hunting almost selectively. Then it
Sure.
starts becoming just about getting outside and the experience and sharing the time with buddies or family members or something. And it's really intriguing when you talk to somebody such as yourself, to where it's like that lasting memory or lasting experience that you can provide somebody else. Maybe it's, a father-son duo and you kind of create that bond or something over hunting.
Right.
I can only imagine just how like palpable and impactful that can be. Of course, yeah, part of it is you're making money off of it, right? You got to pay your bills. It's part of it. But at the end of the day is, aren't we all just spending money to try and make memories, regardless of what it is? It doesn't matter if it's hunting
Sure.
or any other kind of trip or vacation. And you being able to be that catalyst, that mechanism that people utilize to create those memories, it has to leave some kind of fulfilling impact within your life. Like you said, if you're going out there and you're only about killing stuff, it's got to get dry at some point. You're gonna get burned out, because at the end of the day, you're just
Right.
watching other people kill stuff. So if you can't find some kind of deeper motivation behind that, I gotta imagine, as you said, that 300th day, it's like, man, I want to reschedule this
Yeah.
hunt. I want to sleep in. I'm
Right.
done with this.
Right. Yeah, and I think as far as guiding and outfitting goes, like you mentioned, the different stages, you almost have to find a way to encapsulate each and every part of that. From one day to the next, I might have a group of 70-year-old, gentlemen that have hunted their whole life, and yeah, sure, they want to shoot some birds, but it's not necessarily about killing, 100 stack of ducks that day. It's just the opportunity, whether it be to watch their dog work or to share the blind with their buddies, and you never know, how many more opportunities you're going to get like that with your friends, especially as you start to get up there. But life changes in an instant. So, they're more focused on the memory and the instance that you're in then, versus that the next day I might have a bachelor group of guys, and it's just a totally different atmosphere. So you kind of have to be able to read the room and really accommodate people, with their exact needs. So that also kind of helps keep it fresh, because it's not the same exact thing every single day.
Yeah. I don't have too much experience with waterfowl guides. I know you do other
Sure.
stuff, but in kind of staying true to this podcast, waterfowl hunting and labs and retrievers, that's kind of your bag and what we're going to be talking about. But more of my experience and dealing with guides and getting to know people that do the guiding game, it's been through the upland world. And
Sure.
when you start talking about busting cover and long walks and elevation and stuff like that, it's very important to match the correct hunt with the correct client, right? Like, so
Yeah,
you said
absolutely.
you might have a 70-year-old guy who's perfectly content with a bit of an easier hunt and just scraping out a couple birds here and there, right?
Well,
Then
I'm
you
gonna tell you right now, you just send me right with him, because I ain't going up and down those hills with you.
Dude, I mean, it really is important, and it is a direct impact on the finished results. And I think
Sure.
a lot of guides might fall in the trap of just like, hey, this is the hunt, we're gonna go do it, like it or hate it. It's kind of, it is what it is. So how important is it for you as the guide when somebody's reaching out to you? Maybe somebody's listening to this, they've always wanted to do a guided waterfowl hunt. How
Hmm.
important is it for somebody to really line themselves up with a like-minded guide, or at least somebody that can really provide the experience that they are individually looking for?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge, huge thing, right? Especially with as saturated as the guiding and outfitting world has become, in all atmospheres, but waterfowl especially. I mean, there's a lot more guides and outfitters popping up, and the nitty gritty again comes down to, what is your experience level with learning to accommodate people? Because like I just mentioned, and like you said, I mean, there's going to be different age ranges, different physical capabilities, different mindsets, different expectations, and so some people don't ever have that conversation, right? And if you don't have the conversation to know what it is that your customer wants or needs, it's just guesswork at that point, and you're setting yourself up for failure, and the customer is probably going to be really upset.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where, on my end of things, before I ever even book anybody, I always do ask, like, what are your expectations of me and my team, and how can we accommodate you, if things are sounding right for both of us, that this is going to work. So those are things that are discussed. I mean, whether it's on the hunting side of things or on the lodging and accommodation side of things with dietary restrictions, or that sort of thing, every little part is very, very important. But on the waterfowl side of things, really the biggest, what would I want to say? The biggest things we just have to work with are on the physical side of things, with being in a layout blind, laying down. Are you able to do a sit up and shoot? Do you want to be sitting in, a vertical blind? There's obviously trade-offs. Sometimes there's a better hide for, more of a sitting up position, or a blind like that, like an A-frame. And sometimes there's just not the opportunity to hide like that, and you have to lay out on backboards or in layout blinds. And some people just, they don't want to do that, or can't do it. And so it's very important to know what you're signing up for beforehand. So those are all easy questions and easy conversation to have. But if it's not talked about, you obviously don't know what to expect on either end. And so then that's when you end up with people that are unhappy or leave bad reviews, and nobody ever wants that.
No, exactly. I mean, I can only imagine as a guide, you're really after creating the best experience possible. That way you're having repeat clients,
Sure.
right? Like,
Sure.
if you could fill your calendar up with uh, all the groups and hunters that you've already had previous, and you have some kind of relationship, I can only imagine that
Mm-hmm.
that's much more desirable than a bunch of question marks coming in and
Absolutely.
unrealistic or false expectations, or just kind of getting to know each other. I mean,
Sure.
we all appreciate hunting with people that we're familiar with in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, that's how a lot of it does become. I mean, you do end up having higher rebooking rates as you accommodate people better and provide a better experience for what they want or expect. And why wouldn't you want that, right? So sometimes it's worth it to, it may mean you end up shooting 5, 10, or 15 yards farther than what you would have if you had them in layout blinds or laying, on a backboard somewhere, but everybody was comfortable, especially with weather conditions too. Sometimes, inclement weather, you might not want to be out laying in the middle of the field with no cover around you to get you out of the wind or the rain. So sometimes it's worth it to sacrifice just a little bit, and maybe shoot 5 or 10 less birds, and 5 or 10 less birds on an 80 stack or 100 stack, you still shot a lot.
Right. You're still having fun.
So like for me, and a lot of guides out there, I want them to land at my feet. And so sometimes that means like, you're like, do you want to be uncomfortable and shoot a lot more closer? Or do you want to be comfortable and not shoot quite as many, And so that's an easy conversation at the lodge the night before, where you're like, hey, before we load the trailer, what do you guys want to do tomorrow? And then they'll tell you, yeah, let's sit in A-frames to be comfortable out of the rain, or in the trailer blind or whatever. Or, no, we want them close, we want to be uncomfortable, and we want to be done fast, so let's go lay out in the middle, and sometimes it works out that way.
Yep. I can only imagine it's just like, all right, guys, we can be as hardcore as you want to be. We can also just kind of enjoy our time and live the
Sure.
nice blind lifestyle, have some breakfast and coffee in the blind, what have you.
Yep, absolutely.
In regards to the dogs, obviously, with this podcast, where this is going to be tailored more towards the dog side of things, and this is really what I wanted to talk to you about is, we prepare our dogs the best way we can for this style of hunting that we like doing, that we appreciate,
Sure.
that we want to go do with our friends. And so that's kind of the end result. And I wanted to kind of get your perspective from somebody, kind of what we were just talking about. You can be in a lay down blind, you can be in a vertical blind, you can be in a whole bunch of different scenarios. So obviously preparing your dogs for the day in, day out variety and the harsh
Right.
conditions that waterfowl hunting provides us. It's a pretty unique experience to have a dog that can do it all. And I don't even know if you have one dog that can do it all. Why don't you go ahead and break down what kind of dogs you have, how many, just your general kind of thought process as it comes to the dog side of this business.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely more than one way to skin a cat. I'll start off by saying that. And really, it just boils down to what are your expectations of the performance level of your dog. We do see it frequently where, you get a guy that doesn't really hunt a lot, but has a dog and, damn it, they're taking their dog hunting, regardless of the preparation in the off season or just any preparation whatsoever. And obviously, as to be expected, you don't necessarily see the performance that you might hope for. So that said, with client dogs and guiding, a lot of times we will require, just a private group so that if there is an issue with a dog, it's not interfering with somebody else's hunt to where they're going to leave a bad review. And if anybody's upset, it's just your own friends that are mad at you because your dog sucks.
Right.
But aside from that, there is a lot of prep work that does need to happen with the dog in this world because, you might be out hunting with a couple of buddies. It's not too big a deal. You're going to shoot whatever, 4 or 6 or 9 shells or whatever, a volley with 2 or 3 guys or whatever it is. But a lot of times on these guided hunts, you got 6, 8, 10 or more people that are shooting into a flock of thousands of geese, right? So before the shooting even happens, to have a dog that's steady and comfortable, like how can you replicate, the sound and I always say there's a feeling, right? When you're in a blind and there's just thousands of geese setting up and spinning you to come in and finish, or you land them and let them spin again, and there's thousands, hundreds, or maybe thousands of geese sitting in the decoys at 10 yards waiting to just get blasted while you let more come in and spin again. How do you get a dog, steady for that? And really, it just comes down to repetition. I get a lot of times guys that'll come in and say, oh, my dog's the, field trial champion or hunt test champion of this, or he's got all these ribbons and yada, yada, yada. And, you know what? I'm sure they are great dogs at what they're trained to do, right? And I say that because I do respect the amount of time that goes into training these dogs. However, if they don't ever hunt and have real life application, it's not the dog's fault when they crack under pressure like that and either break or whine or aren't responsive. Or, I mean, I've seen hunt test dogs just run right past dead birds on the ground because they're not used to picking up a bird like that. They'll pick up a bumper, but they're not used to a duck or a goose. And so it's like, as the guide or as a dog handler or whatever, it's not fair to be upset at the dog. It's not necessarily his fault because he's just not used to it. So until you get a dog that's been in the field, 30, 60, 100 days a year or more for a few seasons, where at that point, you get a couple years under a dog's belt, they'll just about run you. They know the drill just as well or better than we do, I think, sometimes once they get to that point. But I mean, you see dogs frequently, like I said, that they're just not familiar with that atmosphere, and it's hard for them to make the connections between the training that they know and the real life application. And how can you expect a dog to, let me take your dog and try and teach it a new trick in 3 days? It just, just as well as I do, it doesn't work like that. It takes 3 days for them to even recognize we're doing something new. And then, 6 days or a week for them to start connecting dots. And then next thing you know, a couple weeks in, it's starting to become muscle memory a little bit, but there's going to be hiccups a couple days here and there that they might mess some stuff up, and it just takes time. So that's the cool thing with gun dogs, that, as you talk about versatility and understanding new environments, it just takes time. And so when you ask, how many different dogs do you need or have, when we're hunting to the frequency that we are, it is nice to have different dogs that you can rotate in and out so that you don't, burn a dog out on it. Granted, they don't know when to quit, right? They want to hunt every single day. So they're a million miles an hour. And I mean, I love to hunt, but man, there's days that I wake up at 3:30 in the morning for the, again, 100th day in a row. And I'm like, golly, here we go again, rain day, cold, miserable. And I got to go sit in it for 6-8 hours, but the dog's like, let's go. What are you waiting on? What are you waiting on? But there's only so many 100 bird days in a row that you can have on a dog before, they're going to be limping, getting in the truck at the end of the day if you aren't careful. So that said, it is nice to have a few different dogs, in your arsenal to be able to give a dog a break for a couple days and rest up and be able to attack at full potential again so that you don't beat them down in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, it's real similar to what we talk about in the uplands. There's just no substitute for the real thing. We can sit here,
Sure.
we can use pen raised birds, we can plant them, we can simulate real hunting scenarios, but until you actually go out there and actually get some real reps on game time, the dogs just, it's like you said, it's not their fault. They just don't have the experience or the exposure. And it's the same thing on your end, to where it's just like, yeah, you can trial, you can hunt test and all that stuff, but until they are sitting there watching that funnel of thousands of geese pour out in real time, and all of the people in the blind and all of the environment as
commotion,
a whole, all of the commotion, you bring up a good point to where you can't fault the dog, you can't blame the dog. You have to understand and almost be looking or anticipating for that dog to screw up. And
Sure.
there's plenty of guys out there. I'd be interested to get your take on this. Is in a dog's first season or two, I know that you're a guide, so you're not necessarily carrying a gun, so you kind of do this, but if you're the owner of a dog, it's probably in your best interest, if you're trying to really develop that dog, to leave the shotgun back home and you just handle the dog while they start to get that experience, and you at least build up some kind of trusting relationship in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, spot on. That's hitting the nail right on the head. And obviously, like you said, I mean, there are some guides that do carry a gun, day in and day out. I myself am not one of those for a lot of reasons. I mean, I don't necessarily feel the need to kill. It is more so about the experience and just helping in that environment. But safety is another thing, whether it's people or dogs. Things can change in an instant, especially, with dogs and new people in the blind. So it's very, very important to be aware of your surroundings just all the time. There's always something changing, somebody moving, whatever, uneven ground, you never know. And obviously, like you said, with the commotion, is the dog breaking, does somebody need to be doing something there or whatever. But starting a new dog out, I do think, typically it's almost, and every dog's different. Every dog learns at a different speed. But it's almost to be anticipated, like probably for the first season, like you said, maybe even longer if need be. It's more important to focus on the dog, and everybody's expectations of their dog is different though. So it's like, how good do you want your dog to be? Are you going to allow them to get away with some simple mistakes? Like your idea of a good gun dog might be different from mine, from the next guy to the next guy. And so it's like, how many little bad habits do you want the dog to pick up? Do you need to be nitpicky about it? And so somebody like that, it might be worthwhile to, leave the gun at home for even longer.
Yeah.
But I think especially with a young dog, granted, old dogs will test you too, but you almost have to anticipate where their next mistake is going to be so that you're already prepared to correct it before it even happens. And again, that just comes from repetitions as a handler where, I've been able to spend a lot of time in the field with the dog, and especially handling the same dogs, you kind of start to learn what their quirks are. And so if you see the train start to set up a certain way, or you see what way the wind's working, how they're about to approach it, a blind or a mark or whatever the case may be, you can almost see where, if the train's going to start pushing them the one way, but they need to go the other way, you might start to correct them before they drift 100 yards off mark, instead of, being able to sit them 10 yards off mark and correct it easier. Because then it ends up being on the easier on the dog too, and you don't need to correct them 5 times instead of once.
Yeah.
But that's, and even with braking and steadiness, old dogs, they know better. They should be sitting, but every once in a while they'll start to inch out and inch out.
Oh, they're gonna test you. Yeah.
Yep. And so it's like, do you let them inch out? I had a dog that I handled for 4 or 5 seasons, and at this point, I think she was 5 or 6 years old. And there was one day, for whatever reason, I never had to take her to the truck ever. Not even one time. She never broke. And this one day, she just, every single volley, like for the first 2 or 3 volleys, she came clear out of her blind and like went 3 or 4 feet out. So like, she didn't break, but to me, for a dog that knows better, she broke. And so I was like, hey, I'm sorry. She knows better than to do this, and I got to take her to the truck. And so it's like, even a dog at that point that is a veteran, where I said, she knows the drill and about runs me, I was like, nope, we're done.
Yep.
But it's like, you nip it in the butt right there, so that it doesn't continue to be a bigger problem, where the next time she's like, he didn't say anything last time, I'm gonna go get it.
I can respect that, and I can even understand just kind of the internal dilemma with you. I mean, you're guiding clients, right? So like, just taking the moment to acknowledge that, you have clients in there, you're trying to set a good example, or just a positive experience. Just be like, hey guys, the dog's not on its A game right now. It's testing me, whatever.
Right.
Let's go put it up. But it's interesting, you said that some of these blinds and volleys, it can be 6, 8, 10 guns. And so
Yeah.
I
Oh, yeah.
look at this, especially as a first season or second season young dog, just the exposure element of these environments, to where, we talk about, it's so important to get your dogs comfortable with gunfire, right? That's kind of an obvious one. Well, there's
Sure.
something different with you being in a wide open field and you firing off, 2, 3, even 5 rounds, and the dog being okay with that. Then you go stick
Right.
that in a container blind, and you have 10 guns all shooting at thousands of, I mean, you're talking about 30,
Yeah.
boom, 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 boom.
Sounds like a war zone.
Right. So like, you as the dog handler, don't just automatically assume because you pop off a couple, 2 to 5 rounds in the field, that your dog is completely comfortable around gunfire, because then you can go out and that one experience that you're just like, oh, my dog's good. Next thing you know, you got a lifelong battle with a gun shy dog that could have just
Right.
been prevented if you were,
In the first place.
yeah, if you were just
Yeah.
cognizant of that possibility. So I'm assuming you run primarily labs, or do you do chessies, or do you mix it up? Do you have anything other than that?
Yeah, so actually my first dog, when I was probably about a freshman, or maybe even 8th grade, freshman in high school or 8th grade, we had actually rescued a dog that they thought was half chocolate lab and half chessie, and that was my first hunting dog, and so, at that point I had never been exposed to guys that had really good gun dogs. So, he was steady and he'd fetch, and he would work his little arse off for you, but he didn't run long blinds or hand signals or anything fancy. And unfortunately, he passed away a little bit early. But I actually ended up meeting some guys that are connected with importing, breeding, and training British labs, and I'm talking they are the best of the best from the top down, from not only the importing and breeding, and then also the training too. I mean, that's ultimately what's really taking my dog handling game to the next level, is just being exposed to guys that are really good at it. So at this point, everything that I have now is just a British lab that has been trained with or by these guys at Southern Oak Kennels. And so it works out really well to be able to, if they need a tune up, you can take them back to the kennel, or if you get hung up on something, to be able to say, hey, it keeps doing this, and this is what I thought the correction would be. Sometimes you don't see results right away, and you start to question yourself, even though it might have worked before. And sometimes it's just nice to get that, like, no, you're doing the right thing, like, just stay at it, and it should straighten out. So right now, just the British labs, I have a male and a female. I've got Doug. He'll be 3 in March. So he's hunted 2 seasons with me. And then Sayla, it will be 1 in February. And she hunted about a half a season with me. And then actually she's at the kennel right now for some like genetic and health testing for breeding purposes. So again, it's nice to have a couple different options to rotate dogs through. And then also, with the scaled outfits that we're at, pretty much everybody that's guiding has a dog now. So none of the dogs have to hunt every single day, to where you can rotate dogs in and keep them fresh.
Yeah. So with your obvious perspective and seeing and hunting as much as you do, you alluded to earlier, there's something to be said for these trials and these hunt tests, the dedication, the skill level, the consistency,
Sure.
and I mean, let's just be frank, a lot of it's just cool as shit to watch a dog do what they do in the field sometimes.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's, my buddy Grayson, the other day, he was telling me, it's like people are playing pool with the dogs, right? Like, you can literally just angle and play geometry with these dogs. So it's amazing to watch that. But let's be honest in the same breath that all of those skills, especially to the extent that those high level tests and trials take them, aren't real hunting applicable, right? Like, you might once in a dog's lifetime have some of the blinds or scenarios that they practice or teach,
Sure.
but all in all, it can also be a lot, probably intimidating for a lot of guys that just want to go duck hunting. They just want the meat dog. They want the bare bones. Like, I don't need that title. I don't need that skill. I don't need the dog that can do the 1,000-yard blind retrieve with, 10 poison birds or whatever the heck, they dream up. To what, in your opinion, what is a quality hunting dog? What is the bare minimum that, in your opinion, that if you're going to be a dedicated waterfowler, have these, sets of skills up to this level?
Yeah, I think really the biggest thing with what makes a good gun dog is going to be different from one guy to the next. It's really ultimately, your idea of a good gun dog may be different than mine to the next guy, like I said earlier. But I think ultimately it's just most important that dog's steady for the dog's safety. And also, when you've got that many guys in the blind, you don't want somebody to be upset about a dog screwing up a hunt. So it is important that the dog's able to stay hid, and just, even simple things like getting in and out of the dog blind. Again, I see guys just trying to throw a dog in a blind that's obviously never seen a blind. It's not the dog's fault. But just being familiar with the overall atmosphere of that. So that's the biggest thing. And then again, you see a lot of dogs that run out there and can't even pick up a bird. So it's like, sometimes it is important to take a bird home from the hunt and just work with the dog picking up a bird. And it seems so simple, but I got the hiccups. Just very, very simple, but it's critical that the dog is able to do its job. So it might take a dog a couple times to get used to picking a bird up, a duck up, or even, starting to talk about big Canada geese. They're heavy, 10, 12-pound bird in a dog's mouth that's 45 or 50 pounds or whatever. They might struggle figuring out how to pick it up. And you'll watch a dog that's 10 months old, struggle trying to grab it by the leg, grab it by the neck. grab it by the belly, which doesn't work at all, before they figure out, okay, I got to grab it by the leg, flip it over, grab it by its back, and then they're good to go. And by the time, they've got 2, 3, 4 seasons under their belt, you don't even notice the dog did that, but they figured out, I got to root it over, grab it, and then they're sprinting back to grab another one by the time, you even realize it happened. So again, it just really boils down to the exposure of it, of being well-rounded. But, dogs that only hunt 1 or 2 times a year, they're just not going to, put 2 and 2 together like a dog that gets to do it every single day.
Well, and I would just like to highlight and emphasize that I asked you what was the bare minimum skill level of a dog that you needed for a quality hunting dog. And you didn't sit here and say the dog's got to do 100-yard blind or well, not even just 1,000, just like 100 or 50-yard, a double mark. You didn't say any of that. It started with manners, and then take your dog hunting. And it's and like that's what I love about dog training and hunting with dogs is you can get into the weeds as much as you want. You can just get down and dirty, and you can go after that just crazy 1,000-yard blind dog we're talking about, or you can just literally just like, hey man, teach your dog to sit on place, teach your dog how to get in and out of the boat, and then go take your dog hunting. And if you shoot one and it sails, that's you again. We already said we have a boat, right? It's like you can go out there, you can get a lesson, and you can figure out the skill level that you want to take that dog up to. And I love that so much because it really is true. There's so many people, and this is true on the upland side of the world too, to where it's just like some people are almost intimidated or afraid to take their dogs hunting, whether it's upland or waterfowl, because they don't feel like their dog is ready. And it's like, your dog is never going to get ready unless you take them.
If you don't do it right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, let's be honest. I mean, everybody wants a dog that adds that much value to the hunt where, say a couple thousand geese start landing, on the opposite end of the section that's 1,000 yards away. But I mean, 1,000 yards away, that's a long way. It's over a half a mile. Mm-hmm. Like, there's some humans that you're like, go run over there, and they might get confused. They might get confused about running that far. Try and get a dog to do it. So don't get me wrong. There's dogs out there that you hear stories of dogs running 1,000-yard blinds, or that dog ran clear across the next section, across that county road, across the highway, and damn it, he came back with a bird in his mouth, and who knows if it's the same bird that landed over there. But either way, there are dogs that get to that level. But that's the major leagues of dog handling, right? Like where, like I said, the dog has done it so many times where he is associated, like, this is what happens and this is what I need to do, that they can confidently do that, and repetitively do that or consistently do that. And it ain't going to happen if you don't show it to them and let them mess up. They're gonna mess up. They're going to, good dogs will mess up. So it's just, you don't get a good or a great dog without making mistakes. Just like anything else in life, you've got to fail before you can really exceed and succeed.
Yeah, I mean, 100%, man. I couldn't agree more. Let's break down a typical just average hunt, right? I know this is kind of hard with, especially like you said, the different clients, the different types of hunts, but let's just break out like the actual skills and requirements for said dog on a normal, just everyday run-of-the-mill hunt. Nothing spectacularly really happened. Just talk to us about what you actually require of a dog. You said steadiness, getting in and out of the blinds and stuff like that, but let's go a little bit deeper. Let's talk about, are they sitting in the blind with you on place the whole time? When you send them, are you lining them up? Are you hand signals? Just kind of walk us through just a typical day in the dog work that you go through.
Well, I think a dog just always adds value to the overall experience, right? Considering they have good manners.
Yeah, right.
We all know those hunts that you're like, Drake!
Oh, God, yeah.
You got somebody out there yelling at them, silver lab named Drake, but that's neither here nor there. But the typical, hunt, you'd hope that the birds are decoying right or decoying well, and you get some good shooting in, a few volleys spaced out where, let's say you have some time between volleys to make sure that your dog work is right. And that's where, if you have time, you can be more particular about things being right versus, volley after volley. Those dogs are just picking stuff up as quick as they can, and they'll get a little sloppy on you. But the steadiness is important for me. A lot of times the dog's going to stay, like you said, either on place or in the blind for almost the whole hunt. If we're in A-frames, I may sit in the middle and run the dog between my legs in a gap just because that's what he's comfortable with doing. I like being in the middle so people can hear me at both ends of the blind and I can see what's going on. But there's a lot of guys that'll sit on an end with the dog blind, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. Some guys will run their dog inside the end of the blind, and the dog will just lean its head out. But the dog's used to doing that because it's done it a bunch of times. So that's really up to the dog handler with what the dog's comfortable with. As long as the dog is hid and not running back and forth down the blind and knocking guns over, I think that that's just fine. But you definitely don't want a safety hazard of a dog causing problems. But I will say, if it's cold out with a layout blind or in the A-frame, I mean, the dog might get a little bit closer to you, snuggle up. The dog might want to stay warm, or heck, it's nice to have a dog inside your layout blind for a little bit extra heat.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's a problem as long as it's safe. But then as far as that goes, I guess I don't ever really think of the dog being there or not being there if it's just doing its job. You don't really notice a dog until it's a problem. But everybody loves to have the dog there to give some pets, and hang out with. Everybody that comes in camp, they always remember oh, do you still have the same dog as last year? And they know him by name, which just blows my mind, but people always remember good dogs. And especially for me, I'm better at remembering dogs' names than people's names.
Yep.
For whatever reason. It just works out that way. Once I meet your dog, I'll never forget the dog.
Trust me, I've been doing this podcast for quite a while, and I'll have some people, and it sucks. I'm not the best at names anyway, but it's just I'll have somebody even on the podcast, like a profile episode, and I can't recall them. And it's not ringing a bell until they're like, oh, they'll tell me the name of the dog or the breed. And I'm like, oh yeah, now I remember you.
No problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a testament to just the dogs are part of the equation. It's part of the experience. Right. It's a part of the enjoyment for us as well as the clients. And I mean, I'm always curious, especially when somebody new is getting into it, and maybe they don't come from a hunting background or outdoor background in general, but they get a hunting dog, and just the hunting dog is the mechanism for bringing them into the hunting space. It's the dogs have so much power to make or break the overall experience. It's amazing. Sure. It's like you said, you don't even really think about it. And I'm kind of the same way. It's just when I go out on these trips, hunting or not, you don't even really think about it. It's the dogs are just part of the equation. They're just part of the actual environment and the activity. So it's just a testament to waterfowl hunting, to where, man, those dogs, you gotta love that, man, for them to go through the ice and breaking ice and going through some of the crap that they go through. To your point, they'll sit in they're limping, their pads are cut up, whatever, and they're still just wanting to go on that next send off.
Sure. And on that note, if you want to kind of compare, like you said, just dog handling and the overall environment, I think it is super, super important to network or be exposed to guys that maybe have been through the ringer of, like you said, the different weather elements or the different atmospheres, just for the dog safety, right? You start talking about waterfowl hunting, and a lot of times, it is going to be below 15 degrees, start looking at wind chill. Now it's blowing 15, 20, 30 plus miles an hour. Well, now it was 15 degrees. It's probably below zero, why don't you jump in there and see how long you want to sit out here? And just like one of our last hunts in Oklahoma, we did a lot of shooting first thing in the morning. It was a clear day, so they were flying early. And we got a lot of dead ducks just laying in the decoys, which you're always supposed to retrieve things as quickly as you can. But it was just one of those times where the birds just kept coming, and we weren't anywhere near a limit. So it wasn't like we weren't going to retrieve the birds or shoot over by any means. But sometimes on those cold days, it's worth not exposing your dog to the elements until they absolutely need to be in it. So sometimes if you can hold the dog tight and they're steady enough to sit through 2, 3, 4 volleys or the first 20, 30 minutes of the day till you get that little bit of a lull where you can get them out, they're not in the water for too long, fetch some birds, keep their core temp high, and then get them dried off, get them back in the blind, get them warmed up, or get them by a heater, to where they're not, like I said, their core temp's not going down too low, and they're not getting in the water and then sitting here wet, while the sun's not even up yet and it's frigid. Then you start really seeing some major issues with the dog, and I mean, major health issues where, he can be in trouble, and it's not a good situation.
Yeah.
So if you're, like you said, if you're just using the dog to get out and hunt with them, it's great, but you do always need to be cognizant of the overall atmosphere so that you don't do some harm to the dog.
Right. Is there a magic number that you just say no? Like, I'm not taking the dog out. It's these conditions.
Sure.
I'm not doing it. I'm more used to worried about heat. I generally with what I do with the upland side of things, like with the dry hunting, I don't really have to worry about the cold very much.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say some crazy pheasant hunt or something out west, like that it might play a part, but the dogs are generally dry. They're running, the heart rate's up. They're keeping themselves
Sure.
warm. But like when it gets hot in the summer, I kind of have that 150 rule. If you take the temperature, the humidity, if it hits 150 between the two, it's just like nope, not doing anything with them. How do you kind of measure that as a waterfowl hunting in season when you have paid clients that you got to go out and hunt?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of factors that go into it. I wish it were just that easy, like you said, to factor in a couple numbers and call it good. But really, it boils down to the hide, right? Like, am I going to be able to get a heater on the dog? Will I be able to get him toweled off and stay dry? Or is it one of those situations where we're going to leave the dog with the truck running, with the heat on, and, it's close enough to where, we might shoot 2 or 3 volleys, and, we'll typically run with 2 or 3 guides on a hunt and say, hey, these guys are going to hang out here. I'm going to go get the dog. We'll get these birds picked up. And then instead of leaving the dog out in the elements, he'll go for a swim or two, get our birds rallied up, and then we'll go put them back in with a heated seat and the blower on high, and that dog's pampered, loving life. I mean, and the dog still wants to be out there, but sometimes it's just not healthy. So I do think it's kind of up to the dog a little bit. Some dogs tolerate the temperature a little bit better than others. And so usually right around that 0 to 10 degree mark. If there's no wind, it's not too big of a deal, but you start factoring in, especially north wind where it's blowing cold, 10, 15, 20 mile an hour north wind, man, that'll cut right through you and you're cold, and it'll cut right through a dog. And then that's when you got to start worrying about, hypothermia and what do they call it, limp tail or lame tail or whatnot, where, you might not notice it in that instance, but the next day you'll see that dog get up and, typically their disposition's pretty happy and they're wagging their tail and that thing will just be sitting there. Not a major deal, but if you continue to push them, it will be, so, you rest them up and give them a couple days or however long they need.
Yeah.
And they're usually in good shape.
Yeah, I mean, I know ultimately you have to be the advocate for your dog, because if we leave it up to the dog always, they're always going to go, right? Yeah, I mean, they lack that self-preservation bone when it comes to birds. Like you said, there are some dogs that, smarter than others, I guess, or at least more of a survival instinct than others, I should say. But, it's just a good reminder, because I think that uninformed people or maybe new people, they just assume that, hey, you throw a neoprene vest on a dog and they're good to go. They, that they sent, I sent them and they went, like they're good to go. But you know what, that dog's not going to speak up. That dog, a lot of our dogs are going to go because you send them, and you just, nobody else is going to speak up for that dog. So you have to be the owner, and you just got to be smart about it. It's not fair to the dog to put them in a dangerous situation just to go pick up a duck that you really could go get with your kayak or canoe, right?
Sure. Yeah, and man, you see that all too often, especially with like sea duck guys, where they run a tender boat and you're out completely in open water, and it's like they're launching these dogs off the bow of their moving boats, and it's like, yeah, the dog loves jumping off the boat to go get that duck, but it's like, and then you're grabbing them by, like you said, hopefully a vest, but some dudes by the scruff of their neck, just reaching them over the gunwale of the boat, with this duck in their mouth. And sure, they get in the boat and they're wagging their tail and they're happy. But it's like, come on, what was really gained by that? To me, it's more of a liability that, the dog really injures their hips jumping off or back, or, God forbid, gets run over by a boat, or, it's just like, it's just a bad situation all around where it could have been avoided for the safety of the dog. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As we kind of start steering this to the closing, I got to ask, you spend a lot of time in the blind. Like, I know you got some crazy stories, whether that's client or dogs or birds, all the above. Give us some good just waterfowl duck hunting stories, because I know you got some good ones in the memory bank.
Man, trying to think of some of the good ones right offhand. I've been so fortunate to have so many. um, One of the better ones from this last season, we had a field we just could not beat these geese out of. We shot a limit out of it, say on Monday, and then we shot a limit out of it on like it would have been, sorry, Friday, Tuesday, maybe Monday, Tuesday. And then we hunted it again on Friday. And it was like every time we hunted it, we ended up just taking more and more guns in there to burn it down. And the third time that we hunted it, which typically we don't hunt in this large a group, but we did ask the clients beforehand. This goes back to the very beginning where you're like, hey, here's our options. What are your guys' thoughts? And we said, we can split you up. We can go shoot a few different smaller feeds or whatever, or we can all just go in and just bang this big one. And it's one of those things when the opportunity presents itself, you had the right hide, the right conditions. It was just a recipe for disaster for the geese. And fortunately, everybody's like, yep, let's do that.
Hammered that.
And it did end up being just one of those world-class days that typically you only see in Argentina or Canada or, a hunt like that. But we went in there and man alive, or just burned it down. So that was one of the most just killingest days that we've had. That's very memorable. Just flock after flock after flock, decoying just perfectly, and lots of great shooting. And then again, really good dog work to get things cleaned up that quickly. Mm-hmm. So those ones are always, first to come up. But like you mentioned, I'm just so fortunate to be able to share the blind with, multiple generations at a time. There'll be times that I've had, from the grandson to the dad to the grandpa, 3 generations or 4 generations of guys in the blind with me at one time. And it's like, what a cool opportunity to be able to share with these people that you don't know how much longer that 90-year-old guy, is going to be able to do this with these gentlemen. He's got a hard time. You drive him all the way to the blind and have him walk 10 feet to his chair. And, he might have a tough time standing up, to shoot the birds or whatever. One of these times, we were actually in A-frames on a little marsh where we shot up just a pile of teal. And I think he was late 80s or early 90s. And landed some birds in there. We're like, all right, sir, you stand up. I remember his name, but I'm not gonna say it publicly. But you stand up, and just this old guy just trying to get beated down on this teal, and I'll be darned if he didn't then just shoot him right in the head. Perfect. But I guarantee, that moment, even though it was one, it wasn't 100. I mean, we shot a limit that day, but that was one time that he shot that duck with his family around him. Those are just irreplaceable moments or priceless moments that it's really cool to be a part of that. And then I guess like the most thing that I'm fortunate for besides the people is just the atmosphere, right? Like you get to see or environment, you get to just see so many things. And I've really learned to appreciate the culture places that I've been able to go, the food culture or the people and their way of life, places that you go, even just working in Alaska one season up there in the Bering Sea on St. Paul Island, people just live a different life. They don't have the same things that we do here stateside, as far as amenities go. And some of them never see that to know. So it's just such a simple way of living that everybody has each other's back, and it's a cool thing that people function that way still. It's just so old fashioned.
Yeah.
So for that, I'm just super grateful to be able to have seen so many things like that, and just watching nature interact with nature, other nature like that.
Hmm.
It's like you don't see that, in a subdivision. You might see some deer, eating somebody's garden, but to actually watch nature in a raw form, it's just really, really cool.
Man, I can relate to so much of that, especially the travel. I haven't been to Alaska yet, but I I got some friends and family. They talk to me, constantly. What's the coolest place you've been to, or what they just talk about the travel, and it is really fulfilling to just go into where I go. It's like some of the areas I go to, it's like the most remote areas that you
Hmm.
can find in some of these states, and it's just like just seeing how people do things, and then just how nice they are. Like when I was in
Right.
Idaho, it's just off the beaten path, and it's like everybody I came across, whether it was in a general store or just kind of going and talking to the local game warden or something, it's like just so down to earth. It almost
Yeah.
renews your sense of faith in mankind, and until you drive
Right.
home and you go back through a big major city, and then it's just like, oh yeah, that's right, we live in this world.
Yeah, here we are.
uh, but it's interesting, to man, the old man story. We talk about the first bird that we shoot, or the first
Sure.
bird that our dog retrieved. You got to think, that could very well possibly be like his last bird.
Last.
And just think about it. we
Hmm.
we we hold the first in such reverence, and put it at the top of the totem pole, but it makes you wonder, in the right conditions, if you kind of know that this really could be my last bird or my
Yeah.
last hunt. We don't hear as much about that being as impactful for obvious reasons. It's the last, right? And how many of
Yeah.
those last do we don't even realize it's our last until it's too late.
Recognize.
But that
Yeah.
right there, what you just described, like you may have given that old man, who's probably been enjoying this sport and this lifestyle for
For longer than you and I have been alive combined.
exactly, and what that meant to him, to just put a bead on one last duck with his
Yeah.
family in the blind. I can only imagine what that would feel like.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on. And, the biggest thing I can say to that is I think it's important for us to appreciate, and have just an attitude of gratitude for every instance that we have, and be appreciative of it, that it could be your last, because you never know. It sounds terrible to talk that way, but that's the harsh reality of life. I mean, you see people passing away at young ages, whether it be health issue or an accident or whatever. You just never know. So it's like every single interaction should be treated that way. As you meet new people or as you experience things like that, if you treat it that way, that it could be your last one, you do sure appreciate them so much more. And I think another thing too, going back to what you just said about the smaller communities, like you said, Idaho, or I don't think it really matters exactly where it's at, but these smaller towns, versus a big city, these big cities, there's just endless options for people, right? Like, yeah, if you had a bad experience with so and so's business, you're going to just go to the next one. Well, in these small communities, people are just so salt of the earth because they know that their neighbor that shoes horses is the only one that does it for 100 miles around, and so you value that relationship and that reputation, on both sides. That they give you the good service and personal touch that you would want, and then you obviously pay them on time, or exchange something fairly so that everybody's happy. And it's just that old fashioned relationship that you take care of and scratch each other's back. Those big cities, people just don't have that. They don't build a relationship. They don't have loyalty to each other. And it's sad. I think that that's a huge rewarding thing, of society, that it should be that way. You take care of each other, you build those relationships, and then you're able to say, hey, I've been doing business with this person for decades, or known them for so long, and you make all those memories together, that that they've always got your back, and
Yeah.
that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, I mean, it really is unfortunate. I lived in numerous cities throughout my life recently, Nashville and a handful of others, and it's just disappointing to think that in 2024, as connected as we are, and you put
Right.
so many people in the city, just the level of disconnection that they have. They're disconnected to nature. They're disconnected to food. They're
Yeah,
disconnected to each other. It's just
completely.
it's just frustrating to where it's just like, just connecting on any one of those fronts would vastly improve, I think, the livelihoods of the average person, and really kind of help bridge the gap with some of the polarized issues that we see in today's society. And it's just that's why it's like doing what you do. I can't imagine how many new people you bring in, and you're the gatekeeper almost for a lot of
Sure.
new people coming in. And that's true with all guides. That's whether it's on a preserve, wild bird hunts, even dog training. Like that's why we preach and talk about this as much as we do. And you could argue that we should probably speak on this type of topic even more, because
Yeah, absolutely.
I truly believe that, it is more than killing. It's even more than just food for me, right? It is the experience, and just getting other people, again, get out of the city, get away from ordering your food, and you have no relationship with it. Like, get outside
Right.
and
Right.
interact with nature. I don't care if you miss every single bird. I don't care if you don't see a bird. Still get out there and go do it.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, on that note of, like you said, just going out to eat, for instance, it's like, I mean, for me, a lot of these local restaurants that, I mean, yeah, sure, I do a lot of business with them and taking customers places to eat, but it's so much more than that. Like, you do want a good food or a good service provided, but I'll go places for the people, right? Like the same people that have worked that restaurant for 5 or 10 years or 20 years or longer, you know, you go to create conversation and make memories with people in their place of business too, just like people come to my operation or other places that I guide or whatever. It's worth it to go see those people and share stories, and it adds a huge value on top of the service that's already expected to be provided in a restaurant or in another place of business. When you I know I shop that way, right? Like if I like somebody and I trust them, you're obviously going to want to do business with them. So it works out. And then who's going to be the first person on their mind when they're like, oh yes, somebody wants to go on a guided goose hunt? Well, who's in that place of business, shaking their hand or hugging them every single time you're in there? You impact people that way, and again, it just starts to come full circle. So I don't know that people make that connection, especially in a big city like that. It's like they just kind of stay in their lane, do their thing.
Yeah.
And it's like you need to just continue to network in that regard, and that's such a powerful thing to be able to build relationships like that with people.
Exactly. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, like, you go hunting somewhere for a week, and you just find that restaurant or that general store or
Right.
something that you like, and you don't even really necessarily have to stop every day, but you just stop in, grab a
Sure.
drink, a coffee, whatever on the way out to the next gate, and before you hit the hunt, it's just kind of part of the experience. We talk,
Yeah.
hey, you remember that pub or the bar or the restaurant? And, I'm not the most social hunter out there, but I still, like you said, you develop those relationships, especially if you continue to go to the same places, year after year after year. You're going to develop the relationships. But man, I think we could probably preach on this type of topic all freaking night long. But
Yeah.
I know you got better things to do. But as we kind of wrap this up, I kind of close out the same way every time now, and I like to let the guests kind of steer where we go to close this out, and just ask, what is something that I should have asked you on this episode that I haven't so far?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, Man, we've covered a lot. I think maybe just the gun dog it yourself topic, right? Like, how do you get started into gun dog hunting, right? Like, if you don't have a waterfowl dog and you want to start, where do you start, right? I think that could be a good question, not only for me, but maybe for the next guy too. If they
Yeah.
have a different avenue or approach. But I think that today, I mean, social media is a great tool, right? So like you can network that way before you ever even meet anybody. If you were to just start reaching out, like there's plenty of people out there that can be a great contact to learn from or network with. Whether you're able to meet in person to go see a training day or get exposed to it that way. I think that's a great start. Or, if it's a guided hunt that they have dogs on, ask the people like, hey, how did you get started? Or learn their story. And then nobody's path is going to be exactly the same. But I think that that's a good start to be able to just start, be comfortable and just asking, hey, where should I go from here? Or what's next for me? Before you just jump into it.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, why didn't I do any homework and be prepared? Sometimes isn't a bad thing in life, right? Like sometimes you got to go with, go fly by the seat of your pants and catch up as you go. But I always like being prepared. So never be afraid to ask questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question. And that's the only way to learn. Sometimes, Nick's got different experience or background than I do, where you're like, hey, what are some things, in this situation, or to be prepared for it if, you made a mistake or I made a mistake and learned from it so that you don't have to learn the hard way like we did.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's probably the most useful little tip I can say, is just don't be afraid to ask questions. That's the best way to learn.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly, except I do believe there are such things as dumb questions. But you're gonna remain dumb until you ask them. Like, would you rather appear dumb for 5 seconds or just continue to be dumb for the rest of your life? Right?
Yeah.
Just ask the question.
I get people. They're like, I'm gonna ask you a dumb question, and I'm like, no, there's no such thing as dumb questions. And then they'll ask me, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to give you a stupid answer.
Right.
But I'm not saying that because I'm judging you, but here
exactly.
We go.
Yeah. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. It's like you're not dumb, but the question that you ask is dumb, right? Like yes. It's no personal. But man, Connor, I definitely appreciate this. I hope the listeners appreciated this episode. It was presented by Standing Stone Supply, Onyx Hunt, Final Rise, and Upland Gun Company. Connor, why don't you go ahead and close this out? Tell everybody where they can find you, if they want to book hunts, kind of the process. And of course, I'll throw all your links and stuff in the show notes once we kind of get off here. So
awesome. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me on. Thank you guys for listening. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Maybe we'll do it again sometime. Thank you for the sponsors that help make this possible. If you guys do want to find me, I'm very, very readily available. So call or text me. My phone number is 989-387-0952. Or social media. My personal Instagram is Michigan_Duckman, or the business is Great Lakes Guided Outdoors. And then everything else business related, YouTube, Facebook, website is just Great Lakes Guided Outdoors. So GreatLakesGuidedOutdoors.com. If you want to book a hunt, look it up. There's lots of pictures and information there. And then anything else, feel free, like I said, call, text, email, Snapchat, whatever. We're on the fly.
Smoke signals, Telegram, whatever, man.
That's
just book the hunt, reach out. And I think we should throw out there that we got linked up from our mutual friend and friend of the podcast, yes. Jay Brecky is, he speaks highly of you. I know that he's gone and hunted with you, and I think he's done it multiple times. And so he said that you're well worth the conversation and discussion, and anybody that's interested in going to check you out, that they should. So just throwing that out there for whatever it's worth.
Cool. Well, hey, I really appreciate the kind words. Jay and I have definitely had some really good memories of Field, and I anticipate making more with him for sure. He's an incredible guy, great family, and so that'll be a good time when they're in camp again in, I think, May.
Yeah. I might cut that out just so he doesn't get a big head and overthinking of himself or anything like that. But I enjoyed it, man. We'll definitely be doing this again sometime, and maybe, who knows, our paths might cross sooner or later, even though, you tend to have a little wetter hunts than my drier hunts. So. Yeah,
no doubt. Will you be at NWTF here next week?
I will be. Yep.
I will be too, so I'll see you there maybe.
Perfect. Awesome. Let's definitely link that up. And man, we'll definitely talk soon. I enjoyed it.
All right, cool. Well, thank you, sir.
Yep. See ya.
All right, bye.